All right, so obviously you've seen this kid, and you've seen this man, and you know what the whole thing is, because for what would turn out to be the last few days of the federal government shutdown, the story of this video was inescapable on cable and print news. And if you were listening at all, you probably heard one basic narrative. Peaceful protester surrounded by angry teenage boys. Bad Trump boys. Actually, wait, no, sorry. The boys were being harassed by the Black Hebrew Israelites, and so they were doing chants to dilute the racism, especially this large lad who de-shirted and performed this provocative little number. And the Native American man is bad, actually, or at the very least, unnecessarily aggressive.
He is a liar.
Indeed, perhaps is the truth about this situation, as always, somewhere in the middle.
The space between.
Perhaps the real lesson we should take away from this situation is that we should consider context and listen to all sides.
He was not trying to be disrespectful.
They are being hated on because they are white.
Why do we keep making the same mistake?
You actually have videos, so people are certainly free to make their own judgments about what they think happened there.
White boys aren't given the benefit of the doubt is a bold take. It's not one that I'm particularly interested in addressing, though. I'm not interested in debunking it. I'm not interested in defending it. It's not real. I'm a white boy. I've gotten away with dumb shit. If you're a white boy, which demographically speaking, you're on YouTube, you probably are, you have gotten away with dumb shit. If you know a white guy, you know dumb shit he's gotten away with, because white guys fucking love talking about the dumb shit they've gotten away with. It's a white boy pastime. We make entire movies about this sort of thing.
I love you too.
What I'm really interested in here is how somehow, over the course of 72 hours, this kid somehow went from being a smirking little shit to a cherubic model citizen who only wanted the best for his fellow students and his country. And in the same time span, this man went from being an elder, a veteran, and a representative of an oppressed people to being a patsy, a liar, and a crazy-eyed savage. And all of this came about as the result of a well-coordinated and extremely effective PR campaign that right-wing operators launched the morning after the original video dropped. So we're going to take a look at this entire shit show today and see what happened. It's a great example of how bad faith consider all sides framing can actually be used to promote reactionary ideals and obfuscate the facts. We'll see what makes these campaigns so effective. And that way in the future, you will be able to see what they're actually doing the next time one of these stories comes around, rather than submitting to the stultifying, mind-numbing consensus that is the discourse, here as we know it, in the worst of all possible worlds.
Yes, I know, media, it's Martin Luther King Day, and so you're going to take my words and twist them. But I stand by my words. These kids, from every indication that I have seen, behaved exactly like Martin Luther King would want kids to behave.
So it's cliche to even say this, but the way the news breaks these days is a lot different from the way that it used to be. And most of the time, it's a whole lot stupider. News journalism, by its nature, relies on scoops. Whoever is first to press with the best stories gets the most clicks, sells the most copies, wins the most Pulitzers. And when journalism is done well, a series of well-sourced stories can create a shockwave with ripples that upend entire power structures. What's different about our current news climate is that legacy outlets often aren't driving the conversation anymore. Instead, they try their very best to keep up. I'll use a lighthearted example from my own life before we dig into a much more serious example. So I posted these pictures to Twitter of a New York City subway worker putting down a warning strip of yellow paint during rush hour, leading to these yellow footprints in a bunch of subway cars. Shit blew up big time, and within an hour or so, legacy news outlets were in my mentions and DMs asking to talk to me. I ended up on 2 different local news programs that added absolutely nothing of value to the story.
What is going on here?
No additional context, no comment from the MTA, just this huge dumbass standing there talking about trains. Pat Kiernan did say my name though.
Josh Borman.
And that owned.
I don't know.
Anyway, this is the weird symbiotic relationship that legacy news media has now developed with social media. When a newsworthy viral story breaks on Twitter or Facebook, the first stories from outlets like the Washington Post or the New York Times are rush jobs that simply summarize what can be seen in the video or photo that was originally posted. This allows them to capitalize on the story of the moment, capturing ad revenue through clicks that often come from people seeking context for what they've just seen. Meanwhile, news outlets are doing the sourcing and original research necessary to publish a more comprehensive version of the story. The crux of the argument against the Washington Post, in the current defamation lawsuit, is that they largely abdicated their responsibility to source the real facts and instead engaged in intentional character assassination through hot takery. And here there's almost a point, because the nice thing about hot takes is that, like the cursory summary rush jobs that immediately follow a social media incident, they can be composed off the dome without any supplemental research necessary at all. And in the rage-filled Thunderdome that is Twitter, the hottest take will always reign victorious.
Okay, so I need to take a second here to make one thing abundantly clear. I love hot takes. When they're written well, it's cathartic. It's almost inspirational. And when they're written poorly, you can dunk on them. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, I categorically reject this idea that hot takes in the hot take economy are somehow responsible for the decline of news.
You're a fucking newsman, Don. I ever tell you otherwise, you punch me in the face.
The problem with real journalism, along with it being time-consuming, is that it's expensive. And because it's expensive, many megacorporations seeking a massive return on their investment are leaving skeleton crews in what used to be large newsrooms, even disbanding entire companies whose writers dare to attempt unionization. That's capitalism, baby. So yeah, it's true that a few people watched 30 seconds of the infamous video and fired off a 1,000-word take in order to make deadline, because for those writers, the hot take economy is the economy they are forced to labor in. And it's important to acknowledge this information gap, because when defenders of the Covington teenagers talk about the kids' behavior being taken out of context, this is the exact dynamic that they're referencing. And honestly, it's a pretty smart tactic because it taps into something that pretty much everyone gets on an intuitive level, even if the claim that additional context somehow absolves the teenagers is a load of bullshit.
Which it is.
Context. Context is cool, because if somebody disagrees with you about your stupid opinion and quotes it back at you, you can just say, "But that's out of context," and you win the argument. Debate tips. But seriously though, if the only argument you have to rely on is "that's out of context," it's a pretty surefire sign that whatever you're trying to defend is probably not worth defending.
So as I was writing the script for this video, I watched the governor of Virginia defend the time that he definitely did blackface by talking about how it was in the context of a Michael Jackson lip sync competition.
What's his name? Lip singer? Michael Jackson, excuse me. That's why I have Pam with me. I use just a little bit of shoe polish to put under my, or on my cheeks. And the reason I used a very little bit is because I don't know if anybody's ever tried that, but you cannot get shoe polish off.
Are you still able to move?
Inappropriate circumstances.
My wife says inappropriate circumstances.
And in a truly bold pivot, he used the context gambit to claim that the picture on his page of the yearbook, where he is either this guy in blackface or this guy in a Klan robe, actually isn't him at all. Contextualizing the indefensible can be effective, as it immediately puts the onus right back on the person who brought forward the initial claim by overloading them with previously unknown information. This technique is a variant of the Gish Gallop, also referred to as spreading in policy debate, where you throw out like 15 weakly sourced counterpoints to your opponent's argument rather than one good one. The sheer volume of information makes it difficult, if not impossible, to respond in kind. So let's go back to the Covington teenagers.
It's not rape if you enjoy it.
In that case, I had multiple people tell me that in order to really understand the context, I had to watch a 2-hour-long clip of everyone involved getting berated by some Hebrew Israelites.
That you will burn in the lakes of fire.
So why was it necessary for me to watch the entire video rather than just, a clip, some highlights? Well, without watching the entire thing, I wouldn't be able to understand the context. And as a result of that, I wouldn't be able to understand why these 15 to 18-year-old boys, which are, as we all know, a demographic notorious for being easily intimidated, were afraid for their mortal lives.
Watching the numerous videos is ultimately more confusing than clarifying, honestly.
You first see the Hebrew Israelites yelling at the Native American protesters, saying some incredibly racist shit.
Before you started worshiping totem poles, this land was taken away from you because you worship everything except the Most High.
You also see them yelling at the Covington teenagers and getting in some pretty solid dunks.
Do y'all understand who the real caveman is now?
You see this large lad taking off his shirt and leading the boys in what I can only describe as a truffle shuffle haka. People yell at each other. The boys get insanely amped up, and a few of them yell about how Native Americans just need to get over it because colonialism is the way of the world.
Land gets stolen. It's how it works.
Honestly, it all just sucks, and nobody in their right mind would watch the entire thing, because after 5 minutes, you'd just be like, I could be watching Star Trek right now. I mean, some of the most relevant information, the actual context of the event, isn't visible in these videos at all. And as such, it was largely missed in much of the coverage of the incident. For instance, Nathan Phillips and the people with him were on the Lincoln Memorial because earlier that day, a massive Indigenous Peoples March took place, marching all over the Capitol to raise awareness for and advocate a public policy response to issues affecting Native communities both in the United States and around the world. The ongoing government shutdown at the time of the protest had exacerbated many of these issues.
We did run into a problem of shortage of food because there was a lot of questions that needed to be answered on the national level. If the flow of commodities is going to be there, is the inventory going to be there?
And again, it bears repeating, the Hebrew Israelites harassed them too.
Indian means savage.
Now, the Covington teenagers, on the other hand, they had been bussed in for an anti-choice rally, the March for Life. And to be perfectly honest with you, they were probably still riding an insane high from Ben Shapiro's Baby Hitler speech.
Argument number 10, first of all, okay, that I don't know who's comfortable. Right? Would you kill baby Hitler? And the truth is that no pro-life person on earth would kill baby Hitler, right? Because baby Hitler wasn't Hitler. Adult Hitler was Hitler. Baby Hitler was a baby.
Also not readily visible in the videos are something you might expect to see. Chaperones for the teenagers? I mean, you'd think that grown-ass adults would step in to defuse a situation like this, or maybe, I don't know, get the kids to go somewhere else? I mean, you're chaperoning these kids. Get the fuck out of there! The reactionary plea to consider the context is really just rhetorical sleight of hand. Once they've sown doubt in the prevailing narrative, they deploy specific pieces of information to counter it. It's all about making you keep your eyes on the shiny object they hold in one hand while they unclasp your wristwatch with the other. And if they're really good, you won't notice your watch is missing at all. This is Scott Jennings. You may have never heard his name or seen his face, but you definitely know his work. Scott is one of 3 partners in a company called RunSwitch, based out of Louisville. It's the largest public relations firm in the state of Kentucky. Scott goes way back in Republican politics, having worked with campaigns both directly and by funding them through his own personal super PAC. He's close with Senator Mitch McConnell and was even offered a position in the Trump White House, which he turned down. Scott has a column in the Louisville Courier-Journal, and in 2017 he joined CNN's stable of talking heads. He shows up every once in a while on TV to talk about how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to bankrupt America, or Ilhan Omar hates Jews, par for the course for these people. But the one thing that he never publicly commented on was the Covington Catholic case. That, of course, is because in order for PR firms to be effective, they need to be invisible. And Scott Jennings is good at his job. The video of the confrontation hit Twitter on Saturday, January 19. That very day, SANDMAN'S family retained the services of Scott Jennings' company, RunSwitch PR. On Sunday, January 20, SANDMAN released a statement on the events, carefully omitting some things and misrepresenting others. Through fluent PR speak, the statement managed to bury just enough of what actually happened to absolve both Nick Sandmann and the entirety of Covington Catholic High School from even the slightest bit of culpability for the events that took place. And so, with this carefully drafted statement, the counter-narrative was put into motion, portraying Nathan Phillips as an aggressive, drum-pounding savage, and Nick Sandmann as an average kid who just wanted to make the world a better place, but due to prejudice against white people,
found himself bullied on the steps of our national monument to the great emancipator. From the moment that this statement was issued, everyone from Covington Catholic who faced the media first was coached in the main beats of the script, ensuring consistency across channels.
Today, the Catholic school at the center of that viral confrontation on Capitol Hill forced to close. Students now facing death threats, being smeared as racist over video of a clash with a Native American protester at the March for Life.
All this before the full video was released showing what really happened with left-wing activists who approached the teens first.
Here's a Fox and Friends interview that follows the script. It's with one of the Covington chaperones where this woman claims that the boys were targeted.
Jill, you say that your boys, the boys there, were targeted. Was it because they were wearing MAGA caps?
I think that was one of the reasons they were targeted, and I think they were also targeted for what they stood for.
Which is?
Which is Christianity, the right for life, and they were singled out, and I believe partially because of the color of their skin they were targeted.
The language of being targeted is essential in the prevailing counter-narrative about what happened that day, as it immediately provokes fear in the heart of the middle-aged white Fox News viewer. What if these black and brown people came for you too? She then claims that
we were all just gathered on the steps.
But you weren't there for any Native American support or protest. You were there for what reason, and why did all these other cross currents get in your way?
We were there for the March for Life. It's an annual trip that the Covington Catholic High School goes to, and we meet every year at the Lincoln Memorial at the end of the day to catch our buses.
Which is absurd on its face. The mall is pedestrian only, so if you're waiting for a bus, you'd probably want your group to stand here, here, or here. Not here, because buses aren't allowed to drive here because that's not a road. It's a pedestrian mall. There are bollards that prevent all road traffic from entering. You can see them on Google Street View. This isn't even a good lie. Sorry, I'm not mad or anything. I don't get it. Because she goes on to repeat this inane claim that a bunch of teenage boys just
asked if they could do one of their school cheers because they wanted to drown out the hatred that was being said to them.
Right. That's fucking nonsense. When did a bunch of hyped up teenage boys yelling and jumping around ever improve things? When did this ever resolve a situation? But again, I'm not here to debunk those arguments because they're not arguments. They were created by a PR firm in an information vacuum, and they fall apart under the most basic scrutiny. What's relevant is that it fucking worked. Here's some headlines from some news outlets of record from January 20 and 21, as compiled by Deadspin's Laura Wagner. CNN. A new video shows a different side of the encounter between a Native American elder and teens in MAGA hats. The Atlantic. I failed the Covington Catholic test. Subhead, next time there's a viral story, I'll wait for more facts to emerge. Washington Times. New video shows Native American man confronting Catholic teens with MAGA hats at March for Life. Subhead, conflict at March for Life gets second look after new video emerges. But we know that it isn't about the video at all. The video only shows a different side in the sense that it adds a bit of backstory. The main thrust of the video remains exactly the same. Dozens of white teenagers, mostly boys, surround a handful of Native Americans and taunt them. This smirk is immediately recognizable to any teacher who has ever had to deal with an entitled little shit who thinks he's above the rules. And the chaperones who were there?
Everything your parents own was given to you by the bloodshed of our people. Oh, yeah!
Assuming they were all there, which is unclear at best, abdicated their responsibility to de-escalate the situation.
I am responsible for myself and my life, and I live a very good life.
What changed during those 72 hours was the sudden existence of a well-connected, well-resourced campaign to spread disinformation and muddy the waters. And to this day, RunSwitch has not issued any public comment about the Covington Catholic situation, except to confirm that the Sandman family did indeed retain their services. Our story doesn't end here, though.
Breaking tonight, lawyers representing Covington Catholic student Nicholas Sandmann have just filed a bombshell defamation suit against the Washington Post.
On February 19, noted trial attorney L. Lynn Wood announced that the Sandmann family had retained his counsel and was suing the Washington Post for $250 million. Wood is well versed in the art of manipulating public opinion to help his clients win defamation lawsuits, most notably John Benet Ramsey's parents. As with everything else, I'll link the complaint in the description, but suffice to say, the framing of this suit should be familiar by now because it follows the same beats as the PR script that we looked at earlier. Innocent young boy bullied by intimidating, angry native man who got all up in his face, mad at him just because he was white. And it's here that the other side of everything we've been looking at comes into play. The suit deploys the PR narrative and expands upon it, alleging actual malice. This complaint goes well beyond accusing the Washington Post of crafting hot takes. It says that the Post straight up made shit up with the express intention of defaming Nick Sandmann, and by extension, all Trump voters. In order to win a defamation lawsuit, the plaintiff needs to prove that the defendant said or published something that they knew to be false at the time with the express intention of damaging another person's reputation. The excerpts from the Post coverage, though, well, they don't exactly constitute a particularly damning case. I mean, the claim is heavy on bombast, sure, but most of the quotes are statements of fact.
A viral video of a group of Kentucky teens in Make America Great Again hats taunting a Native American veteran on Friday. When a Native American elder intervened, singing and playing a prayer song, scores of students around him seemed to mimic and mock him.
Most of the students moved out of his way, the video shows. But Sandmann stayed still. The first article features Nicholas prominently by publication of 2020 Fight and/or Titano videos, and emphasizing his alleged involvement as the, quote, one standing about a foot from the drummer's face, wearing a relentless smirk.
Philip said he heard students shout, "Go back to Africa."
Let's go all the way back to Africa.
They were mocking my ancestors in a chant, he said.
You might have noticed something in common about these supposedly defamatory statements. They're from the people who believe that they were targeted, belittled, or otherwise harassed by the teenagers from Covington. The claim doesn't specifically counter any of the activists' concerns. Instead, it categorically invalidates them, casting the entire group as a bunch of liars. It's kind of amazing in its brazenness, honestly. It just takes the brute force approach. Fuck you, you're a liar. In the eyes of this lawsuit, the Native American protesters can't be trusted. There's no way that they might have even misremembered something or unintentionally communicated the series of events in a slightly incorrect order. They're liars, hell-bent on the destruction of innocent children. They get their jollies by intimidating these pure youths and provoking them to the point of confrontation. They took up space, aggressively and unfairly, and they deserve to be punished for doing so. I want to show you something real quick here. It's a clip from Nick Sandmann's interview with NBC Today. If you want to watch the whole thing, be my guest. Most of it is just a clearly coached teenage boy trying his best to remember the script. But there's one moment where the mask slips.
The center of the firestorm, what critics characterize as a smirk on Sandmann's face. Some saying it was an attempt to stare down Phillips.
What do you think that looks like?
I see it as a smile saying that this is the best you're going to get out of me. You won't get any further reaction of aggression. And I'm willing to stand here as long as you want to hit this drum in my face.
After spending all this time pretending that he was just trying to be nice and respectful, the kid gives the entire game away. Sir, how dare you walk up to me? How dare you beat this drum in my face? Don't you know who I am? That momentary flash of anger right there is what this story is really all about. It's not about a bunch of dumbass teenagers and their shitty high school pep chants. It's about spoiled children of privilege who grew up their entire lives being told that they're future rulers of the universe, being confronted with the possibility, maybe for the first time in their lives, that the world isn't exclusively theirs. And obviously they're not actually going to get $250 million from the Post or $275 million from CNN. Instead, they'll try to bog both companies down in litigation until it becomes more cost-effective to settle out of court. Along the way, they've sent a message. The words of marginalized people and groups are not to be trusted. After all, they don't provide context. Trust the folks in MAGA hats, the actual most oppressed minority in America, and you'll find the narrative you're after. This narrative isn't going away. It's just going to keep coming back, popping back into the headlines every once in a while, just to remind us, oh, it exists, like a really bad case of gonorrhea. And in this constant stream of sound and fury signifying nothing, the voices that we actually need to hear are getting drowned out entirely.
I think this is fake. You think it's fake? What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? You come like that. It's fake? Huh? What do you mean?
A lot of people forget that the term
fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Was originally coined to describe something very specific. Kids in Macedonia making websites with names like politicshall.com, posting completely fabricated articles about how the Pope just endorsed Donald Trump for president. Complete bullshit, created to drive clicks from Facebook so that these kids could cash in on Google AdSense revenue and buy sports cars or whatever. As it stands now, fake news is a phrase most commonly associated with our president, who uses the term to describe coverage he doesn't like.
You are fake news.
CNN is, of course, fake news.
CNN is fake news.
As is the Washington Post. Now, the lawsuit that we've been talking about, well, it doesn't specifically name-check the phrase fake news, but it all but goes there, saying, instead of investigation and publishing the true story, the Post recklessly rushed to publish its false and defamatory accusations in order to advance its own political agenda against President Trump. This thing isn't really about this kid at all. It's about the president. That's why the White House reached out to the students after the incident. And here's why all of this matters. By dismissing the concerns of Nathan Phillips and the people he marched with, the entire god-awful machine, the PR flunkies, the Fox News talking heads, the awful children and their equally horrible parents, even the President of the United States himself, they all get to ignore the actual problem, which is that Native Americans in this country don't get the justice that they deserve. The numbers speak for themselves. The Department of the Interior, one of the federal government departments most affected by the shutdown of early 2019, operates the Indian Health Service, which is a key resource for many Native Americans. A fact sheet they published confirms the many disparities between the health statuses of the Native American population and everyone else. The top line number? The life expectancy of Native Americans is 5.5 years shorter than the general population. The homicide rate is twice as high as in the general population. Alcohol-induced deaths are over 6 times as high. Climate change threatens the livability of many lands currently designated as reservations. These same reservations have been directly targeted for voter suppression in recent elections. Indigenous women in the United States go missing or are murdered at disproportionate and alarming rates.
Ashley Mike, say her name! Ashley Mike!
The Keystone Pipeline project still threatens Native communities in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Montana. Meanwhile, the White House is currently attempting to allow further natural gas and oil extraction via hydraulic fracturing in New Mexico, which would quite literally destabilize millennia-old Hopi and Pueblo sacred grounds. You probably didn't hear about any of these things because, well, the spin machine sucked all the air out of the room. Initially, the concerns of Native American activists, well, they just didn't get heard because it took too long to get their side of the story. And then once their side of the story was heard, it was invariably balanced against some PR consultant or somebody coached by one who just watered everything down by adding the right context. And thus the needs, and indeed the very existence of Native American protesters, was once again erased. Thrown on the scrap heap. Just another fucking piece of fake news. But there's the possibility of a better future out there. And it's one worth fighting for. I'm gonna leave you with this. It's a video of Nathan Phillips. It's right after the incident took place, and he's not bitter. He's not angry. He's not resentful. He has every right to be. But he just wants to be heard. So let's listen.
Let's make America great. Let's do that. This is indigenous lands. You know, we're not supposed to have laws here. We never did. For millennium, before anybody else came here, we never had walls. We never had a prison. You know, we always took care of our elders. We took care of our children. We always provided for them. You know, we taught them right from wrong. I wish I could see that energy of that young mass of young men to, you know, to do, you know, put that energy into, you know, making this country really, really great, you know. Helping those that are hungry.
IHS has estimated that we're only funded about 40% of our need.
Funds that we received are through trust and treaty responsibilities. They're not aid.
Our tribal identification that gets us mostly anywhere else. You can cross the Canadian border, you can board a flight through TSA, and yet you can't get into your polling precinct doors.
Why can't people get water?
We are people first, not Redskins.
We will always care.
It's a great day to be Indigenous.
Hi, this is Brian from Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you like this video, maybe hit the like button, maybe subscribe to us. We're a new channel talking about politics, pop culture, art, the intersections between these things. If you like what we're doing and you want to see more of it, then maybe consider donating to our Patreon. We have a link in the description below, and follow us on Twitter. Here are our names. Thanks for watching.
And if they're really good, you won't notice your watch is missing at all. That's it, I'm fucking done with this bit.